Well, hello, fourth hour. Let's talk about what we get to do today. So today I'm going to start Unit 3 for you, which is the Persuasive Speaking unit. You won't need to know your persuasive topic until next week, but start thinking about it today would be my suggestion. To complete work today, you have guided notes and then watching 2 past student examples with evaluations. I'll go over what that looks like. I've also planned some time in today so you can take that survey on Schoology. That's the one that Mr. Peck talked about this morning during the announcements. They being the administrators, they asked for about 15 to 20 minutes of class for you folks to have time to do that, time to think about your answers and complete that. So if you would please, that would be lovely. Tomorrow, day 4, Friday, I'm going to briefly at the beginning of the hour just give you some tips and some info on how to best raise your grade at the last minute here. And then you, as promised, are going to get most of that class time tomorrow to get work for late and revised work. So in other words, you got a work day tomorrow. As you know, tomorrow at 11:59 p.m., weeks 1 through 7 is due. So make sure you get that in. If I often get kids who will message me and ask, well, what if it's in a 12:01? I'm like, that's late then. That's the absolute deadline. So get it in well before then so you don't have to worry. And I'm seeing from my email that I have quite a few assignments coming in, which is lovely. All right, so I'll talk about that tomorrow. So at this point, I'm going to get us slide-wise to where the notes are so that I start right here. We're going to be talking quite a bit today about the amygdala because it's like the emotional gatekeeper of the brain, and it's really important to understand that before you can even persuade someone. So we're going to talk about that today. Let me show you what this is going to look like in your week 8 handout. So if you haven't had a chance, go ahead and open that up. So I already scrolled it down to page 4, which is task 3. So this is where you'll start your guided notes today. So I would suggest listening to me as I go through them just to add it in, because that'll be easier. That way you don't have 2 things open. You can just have this open and I'll show you on the slides on the main screen the answers and what this is. But you'll just write, as we go through the notes, it should be real obvious what to write. That's the whole idea of guided notes. So for example, the first thing I'll teach you is core belief versus regular belief. So you'll just write the definition. You can either put it word for word how I put it, or you can put it in your own words. The goal here is just to show your thinking and learning. And again, not looking for complete sentences when we do that. So you'll write a regular belief or opinion definition and then example, core belief and then example. And then this is one of the things I like about guided notes. It's easier to find the answers. So blank reinforces core beliefs the most. And why? The amygdala is the emotional core of the brain, and I'm going to give you info on it. It's a big part of the limbic system, which controls motivation, learning, memory. So it's pretty key. Blank and blank are the most motivational feelings in getting people to take action. And then to persuade, start with, and notice this one gives you the answer. A lot of times teachers' handouts will do that. So the persuade start with fear and anger and end with. So first I'll teach you about the amygdala and how using knowledge of it will help you persuade people better. Then I'm going to tell you about 2 other things that happen in people's minds when you try to convince them. So I'm going to tell you about backfire effect and confirmation bias. You may have heard about these either in psychology or in social studies, because confirmation bias is one of the big things social studies has to work against. And then finally, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to counter core beliefs and how to persuade. So you'll fill in the answers as we go. You get the idea. So that's your guided notes. And then persuasive speech examples. You are going to watch 2 of the past student examples, see their persuasive speech. You pick any 2 you like. These are in the week 8 folder and also in the examples folder. If you find you're struggling to get it to play, try clicking the second link that shows up when the video shows up. Or I've heard some folks put it in, what is it? Notology? I'm forgetting. Don't you hate it when you forget something important? Anyway, the best way to do the video, if it won't do sound at first, there should be a second link that pops up. Click on that, and that'll open another window to watch the video, or you can watch them together. That's also a possibility for you. Pick two, and then you're going to write the same exact things I've been having you write all semester. I like to keep it consistent. So a couple of sentences or descriptive bullet points on two main things for each of those examples. One, whether or not it's persuasive. So don't just say, yeah, persuasive. What about it makes it persuasive? And then how well the speaker used PV likes. And that's your work for today. All right, already went over that. So the persuasive speech, and like I said, you'll need your topic by next week, but it's very similar to the informative speech. And similar in that it has research, it's the same amount of time, it's about the same kind of writing. We're going to use that ABC 1, 2, 3 outline, just like we did for informative. Your time window, like I said, is similar. It's 3 to 5 minutes. And here I've broken down in your own time. You can look at the schedule for all of this. One thing that's added to the persuasive speech that's different from the informative, not only your goal, so your goal is to persuade, and filler or filter words will be counted on this one. So I'm going to teach you what those are and how to practice to get rid of those. You're going to want to have less than 5 of those to get the best grade. All right. So this is just setting up your notes here, and this is where I'll start for the notes. All right. So when you're persuading people, this is background so that you know more about how people's brains work. One of the problems that you can run into when you're trying to persuade someone is core beliefs. So a regular belief is a lot like a fleeting kind of quick opinion. These change daily. They're really flexible. We don't have a lot of emotional investment in a regular belief. So the example I give here is, well, that cupcake looks good. It's sunny outside. I wish it was a little bit warmer. If someone challenged us on one of these beliefs or opinions, we wouldn't have a lot of pushback. We wouldn't feel a lot of upset in our body. Like if I go, that cupcake looks good, and someone goes, no, it doesn't. I'd be like, okay. You don't get real upset about that because who cares? It's a cupcake. On the other hand, core beliefs, people get triggered literally. And I'm going to talk today about triggers. People get triggered if you counter their core belief. So for example, an example of a core belief would be guns are useful for hunting and defending the home. So what happens with core beliefs is these are formed in childhood and they grow with experience and they have a lot to do with who you are. So it says here connected to identity. It's also connected to memory. So these are beliefs that typically you learned from your parents or your family. And because you learned it from your family, it's connected to who you think you are, especially in the brain. So the brain has an emotional or high investment with these beliefs. One problem with the brain is the amygdala. So it's about the size, it's smaller than an almond, and it's in our brain. And the amygdala acts as if anything that counters a core belief, as if you're being threatened by a tiger. There's no difference in the body to response. So this is why people literally get triggered if you say anything against their core beliefs. So take a moment and think, okay, what are my core beliefs? What are some things that I just really believe and I will get real mad if someone counters me on it? Typically, it's things like how one should live, what kind of laws there should be, that kind of thing. So fear reinforces core beliefs the most, and you've definitely seen that in this country, the last year especially. When people are afraid generally or traumatized, like for example, by a pandemic, they're going to double down on their core beliefs. It's going to reinforce those. So you may have heard people recently talking about, why can't we just, find compromise and get along? That's why. It's especially difficult for people to accept or recognize other people's core beliefs when they're in a fear state. And that's what happens when we're in a pandemic. And the reason why this happens is, like I said, the amygdala. We talked about this earlier when we talked about fight or flight, why you get nervous when there's eyes on you. So the amygdala also is in charge of protecting you generally. That's what it does. So if it sees something that goes against your core beliefs, like I said earlier, it acts as if you're under attack. And the reason why is brains love pattern, they love consistency, and those things make the brain and the body feel safe. So the brain's going to fight to get back to what it considers stasis, what it considers regular. So long story short on all that, fear and anger are the most motivational feelings to get people to take action. If you really want to get people moved, trigger their fear and trigger their anger, which sounds like terrible advice, doesn't it? But it's what works. And the reason why is because we are designed to respond to negative things more than positive. And again, it's because the brain wants to feel safe. So if there's anything we see that's disrupting our groove, we'll go after it. Advertisers know this. A lot of times they start with fear or your anger to motivate you. I don't know if you've ever seen one of the many ads lately for, disinfectants or any kind of cleaner. They start with fear. They start by talking, most of them right now, about COVID. They're trying to get you fearful because you're more likely to go and do something about that fear. They don't start with positive typically, because when you're positive, you aren't motivated to act. Okay, so that's why starting with fear and anger is the best way to motivate people. The army absolutely does this. They break you down, they trigger you so that they can remold you. That's not me bashing the army, by the way. It's very effective. All right. So the next thing you need to watch out for when you're persuading people is a thing called the backfire effect. So this is where the more you try to convince someone that their core belief or opinion is wrong, the more they double down, the more convinced they are that they're right. And you see this happening a lot when people are debating. So in other words, when you show people evidence that their opinion is wrong, they double down on that opinion. Because again, identity is connected to core beliefs. So to them, they may not consciously know this, but to them, it feels like you're attacking their identity. You're attacking them. So that's why their brain will automatically be like, yeah, they'll reject the contradictory evidence and then double down on their belief. Usually, if you see this happen with a person, they will talk about their feelings more than facts. All right. On the other hand, kind of the other side of this, confirmation bias is when you're going out and looking for information, you're going to naturally reject anything that conflicts with your core beliefs. In other words, most of us, when we research, and algorithms are set up on search engines to do this for us already, that's the other problem. We usually click on the first thing that agrees with us. So the first thing that already confirms what we already think, boom, that's what we grab. And that's confirmation bias. So people go out and naturally look for things that support what they think. So they think they're being unbiased, but they're not. And just about everyone has been guilty of this at least once. So that's just a cartoon to show you that. You can look at that in your leisure. So what works then? If the brain is so triggered to fight against things that go against its core belief, what works to persuade people? One thing that works really well is storytelling, because that helps break the divides between people. And our brains are hardwired to listen to stories. Just about every culture celebrates storytelling. And the science shows that within a minute of hearing an engaging story, your brain waves match the storytellers. So storytelling is a great way to persuade people. You can either use little stories from real life, so it can be your experiences. That works really well, as you're showing what you believe and why, or hypotheticals. So you can do imagine a world where, or let me give you this scenario, and then give them a real scenario and then apply it to persuasive. It does not work really well to just start with facts. That works well for informative, doesn't work so well for persuasive. Another thing that works well is make sure you are separating people's identities from their beliefs by recognizing the other side of an argument. That works really well. You also want to avoid name calling, any kind of stereotype. For example, I grew up in La Crosse and we have a lot of Hmong people there. So I would hear a lot of stereotypes about Asian drivers. You don't want to have any kind of stereotype like that in your persuasive speech. In fact, it works better to approach persuasive speeches as a conversation. Okay? Conversation, not a conversion. Your goal isn't to change someone's opinion. The best we can really get at is to get them to go, I hadn't thought of that. So, like I said, what does work? Storytelling. Then plan your speech to lead with emotions and with values first, before facts. You got to first establish to the audience that you're reasonable and that you have a good argument before you start throwing in facts to back them up. Like I said, start with fear and anger if you want to fire people up. So that'll get them engaging with their core beliefs. Like I just said, don't think of persuasion as a battle or a conversion, because that approach just doesn't work. People go to backfire effect and they don't listen to you, or they escalate even more because their amygdala feels like it's under attack and a discussion turns into a fight. So approach this speech like a conversation. Like, I just want you to hear me out. Here's why I think, I don't know, gun laws should change because blah, blah, blah. Here's an example for you of how to do that persuasive speech example when you're watching the student one. So that's pretty much it as far as the notes go. I've also included for you a review of the PV legs in case you need that for the examples. So hopefully at this point you have all your guided notes done. If not, you can go back and look through these same slides, and then you get to watch 2 student examples and write those evals on your handout. Flip back to the beginning here. Remember, also set aside some time for you to go ahead and fill out that survey, please, on Schoology. You have the rest of the time to do this. Go for it.